Once again, Slick and Shiny Productions takes you for a trip back in time. We're looking at Manor, Pennsylvania. And we're going to see some things in the old town that aren't there no more. This was the commercial hotel right across Race Street from the station, from the railroad station. Just up the street, about 2 doors up the street, was another hotel, the Douglas Hotel. This one had a dining room also. Now I want to show you where they were. This was the commercial hotel here. This was the Douglas Hotel, right beside the tracks. And they were very conveniently placed right across Race Street from the train station, right here. So if a person came into town and needed a place to stay, well, there were hotels. And I'd like to make a comment on why this was called Race Street. Race Street. It was not called Race Street because people raced there. It was called Race Street because the mill race went right past it. Now, in the 1870s, those hotels were not there yet. Instead of those hotels being there, the river, rather the Brush Creek down here, had been tapped over here, and a ditch had been dug for the mill race, and the mill race ran right down here. There was a mill here, there was another mill over here. And a person who lived there at that time, who moved into Manor in the 1870s, said you could see the water flowing through it, flowing through the race, even though it had boards on top of it. Said when they were grinding, they diverted the water so that it would go over through the race, under the boards, to keep the mills going. That was before they had the steam mills set up. The mills were run by water. Another thing that was important in town was having a livery stable, because when a person came into town on the train and had to go out to visit relatives, or maybe a traveling salesman out on business, there were no taxis, there were no cars yet. So he had to go to the livery stable to get a horse, or a horse and buggy. This was Walthour's livery. The Walthours were some of the first people around there. This was the Walthour's livery stable. This was where they kept the horses and buggies. Actually, the horses were over here and the buggies were over here. And we're going to next see something up here. There was a store. Heasley Brothers had a store. It was connected to the house that the Heasleys lived in, which was right beside it here. We're going to get a look at that. This was the Heasley Brothers store, right across the tracks from the railroad station. 2 brothers ran the store. It was a grocery store right next door from the house, which was connected to it, where they lived. Another one of the Heasleys was named George. George did a lot of things when he grew up, but he also did artwork at times. And one of the things that he did a painting of was the station. It was across the street. This was the store, the Heasley Brothers store, and that's the relationship showing the station across the street. And that's a painting that he did of it. I wish I had it in color to show to you, but that's just a black and white image. That was George Heasley, out looking at some of the coke ovens north of town. George lived to be quite an old fellow. He lived to be 99 years old. He died in 2018, just 2 years ago. Now this points out another enterprise in town the Manor Electric Light Company. They actually made electricity at Manor starting in the 1890s. They got one of the dynamos that had been used in the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And when the fair was over, they brought it back to Manor and set it up. And they were producing electricity, not just for Manor, but for other places around there. The Beamer family were the ones who had this enterprise. They had been in town for a while. In the 1860s, Michael Beamer started a factory where they made handles for mostly mining picks, and then they branched out into making handles for other kind of tools, which were sold all over the country. Now we're going to take a look at a couple things over here. This is the railroad running through, and this is Brush Creek coming down around the town. And we're going to look at a few things out here on both sides of the creek. This is the creek coming down, the railroad up here. And we're going to see back when there was a lumber company over here and a place over here that made electricity. Now this takes us back to the first decade of the 1900s, before that bridge was there. The railroad tracks were right up here. And over here was a lumber company. This is where they generated electricity. There is still a substation there. They're not generating power there anymore. It's just a place where they break down high voltage into lower voltage that can be used by commercial and domestic places. This is on the other side of Brush Creek. This was the lumber company. Kemmerer and Moore. This was Mr. Moore. This was Mr. Kemmerer. They were playing checkers one day when things weren't too busy. This was the lumber company over here. And as time went on, they extended the street here to go out over Brush Creek. And we will get a look at that. When the street was extended out there and a concrete road was put down, the lumber company was no more. This is the street going out over top of Brush Creek. This is the railing, concrete railing right above Brush Creek. Brush Creek flows right through here. And on the other side of it then, there was a building that once upon a time housed a small factory that made phonographs, the old wind-up kind of phonographs that played the old 78 RPM records. This was one of them. It was called a dual tone because they had two needles, and one might say it was something like stereo, but I would not push that comparison too far. When the radio started to become popular in the 1930s, this was put out of business. And another thing that was out on that road that went out east of town toward Penn and Jeanette was the trolley line. This is one of the early trolleys. They weren't as big as the later ones. This shows the line, trolley line going out from Greensburg out through Jeanette, Penn, and Manor. Through Manor it went to Irwin, where it could branch out going to different places, the whole way into Pittsburgh if you wanted to go that far. This shows the trolley line going out beside the road when it was dirt. It was going out toward Penn and Jeanette. And I think we've seen about enough for this one. And I'll say so long for now, and we'll see you again. Bye now.